Welcome to Isaiah Shift Part 2B. Because I ran out of memory on Part 2, I didn't get through the Grand Canyon. So, before we get back to the strata, we showed how these layers were layered up through 50,000 galactic years, from 80,000 years ago till 30,000 years ago. And I don't think I quite explained this flood. To be a global flood, you don't need an extra 200 feet of water, or 1,000 feet of water to cover the whole world all at the same time. We already know that gravity affects water a lot more than the earth because of the tides. When the moon is on this side of the earth, it sucks the water from the center of the Atlantic, and it's low tide all around the coast. And just the opposite, it's high tide in the Pacific because it's pushing the water against the side. So the moon and the sun, to some extent provide polar or tides. So we need to think of this flood not as all of a sudden there's a whole bunch more water on the world. No, same amount of water, but it goes back to this axial force, this gravitational force that we have to go through. When we're in the center of it, it's pushing the water from one side to the other. It's like taking a tennis ball. What if this was a wet tennis ball and we tilted it like this? What would happen? It would get dry on this side and it would be dripping wet on this side, right? So that's how the force creates the flood. It creates water, incredible tide on this side. And since we're spinning 24 hours a day, we're going through this tide every day. It's going to be dry on one side and then tidal waves. Okay, so that's how the flood does it. It's repeated cycles. Every time we go through an Isaiah shift, there's going to be we're going to go through this flood type activity every day, and it doesn't really matter if we're rotating one way or the other. That part doesn't matter, and I don't know if we will or not. Stories of the longest day. Well, if we were pointing at the sun, yeah, it'd be a long time in China, wouldn't it? Because it never goes out of the sun. Southern hemisphere wouldn't have any sun. It would be a long night. Okay, so getting back to the globe, I want to use a big one for now. I talked about this is not just continental divide where the Grand Canyon was formed and then cut through. It's a circumferential divide. So what happens? We've got a big glob of water out here. Big glob of water. And as we're going through it, this circumferential divide is acting like a sweeper, and it's taking that water with it. So that kind of explains why China is buffered. You notice that there's a little bit more old world history in this part of the world, and as you go around, again, a lot. But then when you back up against the United States, very little. If a galactic year is 6,000 years, and think about it, it took them, it was 4,000 years ago, so it took 6,000 years to discover the new world over here. And what happens is this ridge, as the water gets all this sediment and gathers it as it's going over, because it's a great big tidal wave. We're going 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. So this glob of water that's out here, that's being a huge tide because of this gravitational force, this huge tide over here, as we go through it, is building up layers, until that time, and I believe it was exactly, well, I'm not going to say exactly, that was 80,000 galactic years ago. Once it got to the top up here, at that point, the water got where it was, you know, just barely going across every time it went around and then one time, instead of depositing more layers, it started cutting through. So, to refresh, I do believe that the Grand Canyon was cut predominantly from east to west, because that's the way we rotate. And I think you'll find whenever you see big blockages, there'll be sediment going around it and on the other side. It'll wash out in front and leave it behind. That explains why North America was last to be found. So 80,000 years is when the sediment started forming in that area, when it started building up. Isaiah shifts till 30,000 years ago. And then for the last 30,000 galactic years, it started cutting through. But it had to cut from the same level. So that was about the peak. So what I anticipate is the tide, let's say the top of the Grand Canyon is 5,000 feet. That tells me the tide, when we're at the maximum, going through the Isaiah shift at the time, is 5,000 feet above sea level at the Rocky Mountains. So think about what it would be elsewhere. And don't think about the whole world being all of a sudden the water increasing. No, the water doesn't increase. It just focuses on one spot like a magnifying glass, because of that gravitational plane all sucks it to the other side of the world. We have to go through that great big tidal wave every day, 24 hours till we move through it. And that's the description of the flood. I'm going to put lots of descriptions and links to the evidence that I have that supports this theory in the description, so please make sure you took a look at that. And I thank you for watching. Bye bye.